How's it going, everybody? So we have a fun review today as we're talking Thunderbolts. Truly, it never gets old talking about the MCU these days, especially post-Endgame. It seems like every other project, the MCU is dead or the MCU is back, and it's just this endless cycle. I have to admit, I originally was not that on board with a Thunderbolts movie. Slowly, though, as we saw more stuff in the marketing, it did pique my interest a whole lot more than I originally expected. After finding themselves ensnared in a death trap, an unconventional team of anti-heroes must embark on a dangerous mission that will force them to confront the darkest corners of their past. Never in a million years would I have expected walking out of Thunderbolts not only growing incredibly fond of this dysfunctional group of characters reluctantly coming together, also adoring the mature emotional complexity the narrative brings to the table, exploring the dynamic between all of them. With a multitude of MCU projects at this point, you kind of know what you're expecting going into an MCU movie, mostly when it comes to the action and humor, which there's a good amount of both in this. But what makes Thunderbolts surprising is the gut punch of emotions you're hit with as they form a bond, becoming a team. A lot of the narrative in Thunderbolts actually is quite character driven. The team dynamic is one of the best parts of the experience for me because it does feel quite genuine. There's this overwhelming, infectious energy to this team and the journey they go on because the majority of them have to learn to like each other and be this team whether they like it or not. And though for the most part we've seen these characters before have minor roles in MCU projects, getting to see them flourish in this team-up movie, I did find myself becoming far more attached to several of them. A good amount of the themes of Thunderbolts actually are much more dark and mature than you would anticipate compared to a lot of MCU projects, as it touches upon a lot of different topics surrounding mental health, whether that be depression, self-worth, trying to find purpose. There's quite a lot of sequences in Thunderbolts where all of these heroes are just sitting around, having these long discussions about their emotions and the consequences that come psychologically from being a hero. In some ways, the story kind of makes you feel bad if you're one of those people like myself that wasn't overly fond of this lineup of characters originally because they aren't the amazing heroes you want in an Avengers-style team. Also, there's a large chunk of Thunderbolts that has this nightmare-like horror influence that's used in such a way to further hammer home the feelings they're struggling with in a creative way tied in with the antagonist. All of these hurdles of adversity the Thunderbolts have to overcome, while becoming the support system for one another that they've always wanted, was so satisfying. One of my major concerns about the team structure is the majority of these characters are super soldiers, so how do you have a lot of variety of action when the majority of them have extremely similar power sets? Nick Schreier finds a way to make some pretty impressive action sequences. Compared to a lot of other big MCU films that involve giant team-ups, this is probably one that has the least amount of action. Still though, Thunderbolts manages to have some fantastic, creatively interesting fights, whether they be the Thunderbolts fighting one another or the Thunderbolts taking on other foes. Many of these scenes have a more grounded feel to them, and I think that does add to the visceral nature, but it's also cool to see these different fights highlight every team member's strengths. In my opinion, the one who probably had the most cool moments, probably because they have the coolest powers out of the Thunderbolts, I'd have to give that title to Ghost. As I said before, this group of characters they assembled to become the MCU Thunderbolts, they weren't exactly my first options. Most of these characters I did enjoy, just not my preferred characters who I would put in a team of Thunderbolts. The only one I would say I wasn't a big fan of going into this probably was Taskmaster, and it didn't seem like Thunderbolts cared all that much about Taskmaster either, whether it be the marketing campaign or in the movie itself. Everyone else in the Thunderbolts gives pretty brilliant performances. Sebastian Stan has some great moments of action while grappling with some bigger responsibilities at play. Out of the Thunderbolts, besides Taskmaster, I would just say temper your expectations on how much Bucky is actually in the film. John Walker more or less feels the exact same as he did towards the end of The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Now he's just US agent. That could be seen as a positive if you liked his character in that show, or it could be seen as a negative or something you're not as fond of. Big standouts for me personally definitely is David Harbour and Florence Pugh. In some ways, this movie did kind of feel like a spiritual sequel to Black Widow because of how much heart these two inject into the narrative. David Harbour has so much life and brings so much great energy, and much like back in Black Widow, I continue to love this strong bond that he has with Yelena. Anytime Florence Pugh is in a movie, I know she's going to give a fantastic performance, but I continue to love more and more what she adds to the MCU playing Yelena. What she brings to the character in Thunderbolts, I think makes Yelena a really strong contender to be the future leader of the next generation of Marvel. It's outside of the various different jaw-dropping action sequences she's the centerpiece of, her performance is multi-layered and very emotional. emotional. There are many different dramatic exchanges, especially between her and Alexei, that hit hard, as Yelena in Thunderbolts is forced to deal with any of her inner struggles head on, particularly in the latter half of the film. Whether or not you want to include Bob or Sentry as a member of the Thunderbolts here, I will say, for the most part, I like what we're doing with this interpretation of Sentry within the MCU. He's a really tough character to include in the MCU, not only from a power level, but just because he's not a very stable individual. And I think that's part of the reason why we have not seen Sentry to this point. Louis Pullman here, though, I gotta give him his credit. He does find a good way to balance out the character. He walks that line exceptionally as both Bob, Sentry, and the Void, balancing the complexity of mental illness. There's a lot of highs and darker elements making his appearance exciting or terrifying due to how incredibly strong he is compared to the Thunderbolts. Some aspects to Sentry I do wish was a little bit more fleshed out by the film's conclusion, but I'm hoping with where we set things up for the character for the future, I have to imagine they're going to leave some things left open to explore more in the future, so I'm very excited to see where we go with the character. Sentry costume also looks pretty great in the movie. You've probably already seen it because it's been leaked all over like the different toys and stuff like that. Given that we are at an impasse when it comes to the MCU fandom, where there are a lot of people that have not been overly fond of the product Marvel's been putting out in recent years, I feel like if you give Thunderbolts a chance, you'll find it pretty refreshing, since a good amount of the ingredients here feel like the classic MCU a lot of us fell in love with, especially in comparison to some of the early Avengers films or the Guardian films. How both of those endear you to these ragtag group of characters, their great banter. Plus, it's interesting to see that Thunderbolts does a lot to stand on its own without trying to connect too much to the future of the MCU. However, what is set up here, including the 2 post-credits scenes, I think they're pretty exciting, especially the second one. All around, I was stunned by how incredible Thunderbolts truly is. They find an excellent way to breathe life into these characters that you would not anticipate, and it's great to see these smaller characters in the universe discover purpose in a fulfilling, action-packed, and emotional adventure. Like many of you, I went into this wondering what exactly is this asterisk going to mean in their name, and once you find out what that answer is, I will admit I thought it was pretty cool, and it sets up some exciting stuff for the future of the MCU. Once you get a chance to check out Thunderbolts though, make sure you share your thoughts down below. What'd you think of the film? Did you like the film? Did you not like the film? Thank you guys, as always, for checking out videos. I always do appreciate it. Make sure to like on the video and also subscribe to the channel to update reviews, reactions, unboxings, and more. Until the next time, I'll see you guys later.